I read 20 books in 2023 and I'm gonna tell you all of the books I read, what I thought of them, my rating of them, and whether I recommend you read them or not. This year I didn't have any books I hated. I remember I did this video last year and there were a few I was like 1, 2 stars, like really didn't like that. Some I didn't even finish, which is quite unlike me. Like I have to really hate a book to not finish it. So luckily I didn't have any I hated this year. Okay, we started off in January with a book called On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. This was very hyped. The story itself was really good. However, the way this book was written was like so overly poetic to the point that you almost forget what you're reading about a lot of the time. Like you'd be reading bits that were so, I have no other way to describe it other than poetic, to the point that you're just like, what is the need for this? Like I'm just getting confused in the story. And yeah, lots of like nice highlightable parts of the book, but I don't think the poeticness of it made it better. Like I think if anything it made it way worse. And I saw loads of people rave about it and the way it was written, and to be honest I just thought it was too much for me. I gave it a 3 stars because I did think the story was really good, but that made it difficult to read for me, to be honest. Next book I read in February after doing Dry Jan was the Soberg Society handbook. I think I just wanted to read something to encourage me with Dry Jan and to maybe try and continue that. I think I did end up carrying it on. I think I drank once in February or something and twice in March because I was kind of on a bit of a sober stint and I kind of wanted to read something that would, you know, keep me in that mindset. The Soberg Society did that. It was good. I mean, it wasn't like a, you know, amazing breathtaking read or anything. I give it 3 stars, but it's definitely a good starting point if you're wanting like an easy read motivation to quit drinking or lessen your drinking habits. There's a few other ones on the same kind of topic that I do want to read. I think honestly that one was just on sale for 99p on the Kindle store at the time, but I want to read The Unexpected Joy of Being Sober. I want to read, is it called Blackout? I can't remember. And Quit Like a Woman. I want to read that as well. I mean, a good starting point, but probably not the best out of those books, but I can't really be the judge of that if I haven't read those other books, so I'll let you know when I do read them. Next up, I read Panenka by Ronan Hessian. I really loved this book. I gave it 4 stars. I actually read Panenka because it was on Jack Edwards' top books of the year, and I trust his reviews with my life. I don't know, I feel like he just has really great taste in reading. I've never read a recommendation of his that I haven't loved. It was only 180 pages or around about that, and it was just like very emotional but also heartwarming at the same time. It was a lovely little read. Next book I read was Before the Coffee Gets Cold. I had seen mixed kind of opinions on this book because it is quite, I want to say monotonous, but when I say monotonous that sounds like in a negative way, and I don't even mean it in a negative way, because I thought there was something very like comforting and calming about the kind of story just all being set in the coffee shop and it kind of being a little bit monotonous. Like it almost felt like a children's book in that sense, but it's not written like a children's book. I'm probably not explaining this very well. I did find it very comforting. I gave it 4 stars. It's not the most gripping thing. You're not gonna, you know, pick it up and not be able to put it down for an entire day, but each little story of like each person that comes into the coffee shop has its own little message, and I just really like that. Next up, I was in my single era and I read The Unexpected Joy of Being Single. I was really trying to force myself to love being single, and The Unexpected Joy of Being Single did help. I think you have to read it in the right frame of mind. I don't think there's any point in reading it, you know, right after a breakup when you're hating your life. But I read it like a couple months after and was feeling better about myself, and you know, it got me in the headspace where I want to be single now for the rest of my life. That didn't happen. I really liked how this was written. It was very conversational, quite, it's like a memoir kind of. It kind of gives Dolly Alderton vibes, but not quite as good, but I really enjoyed it. Again, it wasn't anything like breathtaking. I gave it 3 stars. I feel like a lot of my ratings are 3 stars. Actually, no, there was a few 4 stars there. Oh, next up I got into some poetry and I read, oh my god, this is so cliche, and slag me off all you want, but I fucking love Rupi Kaur. I don't know if I'm saying that right. So I started off with Rupi Kaur's Milk and Honey, and then I did Homebody. I loved both of them, but I gave Milk and Honey a 5 stars and I gave Homebody 3. Milk and Honey is the most cliche poetry book, like literally in the entire world. It's literally giving Tumblr 2014. And I know that, but I don't care. I loved it, and it's what got me into poetry. Like, I literally couldn't recommend it enough. And I think it also just came at perfect timing for me. Do you ever get that when poetry either sits really well with you and like you really kind of resonate with it, or it's about something that you're just not going through, so it just like entirely doesn't sit with you at all. And I think Milk and Honey just came at a time that I really needed it. At whatever stage I was like going through in my life and like with the breakup and stuff, I think, yeah, Milk and Honey was just perfect timing, and that's why I gave it a 5 stars. Homebody, again, I did love it. Like, I honestly do think her work's amazing, and there's something just really nice about her poetry books, and I got like the hardcovers and everything, and I just felt very bougie reading my poetry, you know. But yeah, 3 stars for that one. Then I read The Tools by Phil Stutz. I read this because I watched Noah Hill. Is it Noah Hill? No, Jonah Hill. I watched Jonah Hill's documentary. Well, it was Jonah Hill and his therapist's documentary, and his therapist is Phil Stutz. And his therapist was talking all about his tools, and then I looked his therapist up, turned out he had a book. So I decided I was going to read the book because I found the documentary very interesting. I did find the book very interesting, and I'm like really glad that I read it because it was just a good non-fiction book to read. It gave me some, you know, good knowledge, good things I was able to talk about in my podcast, things I was able to introduce into my life. However, with a lot of those kind of like self-helpy psychology non-fiction books, they can be very repetitive. So for example, in this case, like, I think he's talking about 5 tools, but obviously it's a full book on these 5 tools. So a lot of the pages is just like giving different examples of that tool and like going over the same thing over and over again. So those books can be very repetitive, which doesn't make for like an amazing reading experience or a very like engaging reading experience. However, I was really glad that I read it. But yeah, I give this 3 stars. Phil Stutz's whole thing with like the tools, basically he trained in like normal, well, what would you call it, like traditional therapy, and he thought, why isn't this working for everyone? Do you know what I mean? I'm coming out of meetings with clients and I'm not feeling like I've helped them after a session. I'm not feeling like they're coming away with practical skills or like things they can do. If anything, I'm feeling like I'm burdening them more and they're going away like traumatized from the session because they've had to like bring up all this stuff. And he kind of developed his own then tools as like an alternative therapy, I guess. So instead of focusing on the past and like thinking about the whys and like why you did this, why you did that, why you behaved a certain way, it's more like coming up with practical solutions and actions that you can action straight away. So it is a good book if you're wanting practical advice and tools you can do. The next book I read, this followed on from reading Panenka by Ronan Hesse, and then I decided to read another one of his because a few people messaged me after I'd put Panenka on my story saying you should also read Leonard and Hungry Paul. So that was my next one, Leonard and Hungry Paul. I definitely did not enjoy this as much as I enjoyed Panenka. However, I didn't not like it. I still thought it was a nice little comforting read. Again, not a page turner, but quite a nice kind of like bedtime winding down read, if that makes sense. Now that I come to think of it, I really can't remember what this is about. Leonard and Hungry Paul. That's quite bad, isn't it? Yeah, anyway. Next book was another Rupi Kaur poetry book, and this was The Sun and Her Flowers. I gave this 4 stars. If you haven't gotten into poetry, I think Rupi Kaur is a very good gateway into poetry. It's very simple, very short, very easy to read, lovely illustrations, lovely physical books like hardbacks. You can get the little set of the 3 books of The Sun and Her Flowers, Milk and Honey, and what was the other one? Homebody. You can get like a little set of the 3 hardbacks. It's stunning. Okay, then it was I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I actually listened to this as an audiobook, so that's maybe cheating. Is it? Yeah, it is kind of cheating, but I put that on my 20 books I read. I gave this a 5 stars, and I am reluctant to give anything a 5 stars. This was a fucking amazing book. I'm not usually good at listening to audiobooks, but what I have discovered is that I like audiobooks when they are self-narrated memoirs. So when it's a memoir and it's narrated by the person who wrote it. And I think that's just because they tell the story in the way they want to tell it, with the emotion that they felt when they were writing it or they felt needed to be portrayed, as opposed to like someone just coming in and recording words on a book in front of them and, do you know what I mean? Just kind of reading it out like it's lines. And for that reason, I have now tried to download a few more kind of self-narrated memoirs, because I do want to get into audiobooks more. I just do find them really hard to listen to with some of the voices are just, I don't know, you end up zoning out and 20 minutes later you're like, have I been listening to a word that's been going on here? I did not have that problem whatsoever with I'm Glad My Mum Died. It was incredible from start to finish. It's written so well. It's also read out so well if you want to listen to the audio version. I think I honestly didn't stop playing it for 2 days straight. Just finished it in 2 days. It was that good. Next up was My Year of Rest and Relaxation. Apparently, so when I was reading this, my housemate was like, what's your thoughts on like everyone romanticizing the main character and like, you know, romanticizing her mental illness and addiction and everything? And I was like, huh? What social media or like what TikTok are you on? I haven't seen that at all. But apparently the whole kind of like Lana Del Rey, Tumblr 2015 group of people were kind of like romanticizing the main character in this. I didn't see that. And I also did not get that perspective myself. Like, I was not romanticizing the main character whatsoever. If anything, I found it quite like satirical, if that's the right word. It did take me a while to get into, but once I got into it, I really enjoyed it. And I really kind of found the main character quite funny. I think I kind of like when the main character isn't a protagonist and you kind of get this different perspective. I don't know, I thought it was a really good book, to be honest, once I did get into it, but it was definitely a slow burner for me. I did give it 4 stars though. Oh, another 5 stars. Honestly, this has to be my book of the year, I think. This has been on my to-read list for so long, and I'm so glad I finally read it this year. And that was In Order to Live, A North Korean Girl's Journey to Freedom by Yeonmi Park. Oh my god, this book was incredible. I have recommended it to absolutely everyone ever since. Anyone that ever asked for a book recommendation, this is my go-to at the moment. It's such a moving story. It's not told in a very memoir way. You almost forget that you're reading someone's actual memoir. It's told in a very kind of, as if it's a novel. So you get very kind of like, you start to think they're characters when they're actually people, you know? It's extremely emotional, it's extremely eye-opening. It's just a crazy story. I know there has been some criticisms of her over-exaggerating things or lying about things. I'm not gonna say my piece in that, I don't care. Who am I to get in the way of a good story? You know what I mean? If she wants to over-exaggerate things, good on her. She escaped North Korea, so fair fucks you, exaggerate away. Also, I just feel like with anything that comes out of North Korea, there's maybe always going to be an element of people claiming they're lying because no one actually knows the truth. So like, are the people claiming that they're lying trying to protect North Korea, or maybe they are lying and but we'll actually never know because we don't know what's going on there? Do you know what I mean? It's one of those things you just, I don't know. You don't know. No one knows. So we might as well just enjoy the story. But honestly, 10 out of 10, you have to read. If there's one book you read this year, make it In Order to Live. Oh, another 5 stars straight after this one, and that was Conversations on Love. I think I got this recommendation from Paul Mescal, you know? I think he said in an interview one time that that's what he was reading, and I thought, if Paul Mescal's reading it, I'm gonna read it. And that I did. Conversations on Love was what I needed, and I didn't know it at the time. It would put me in a good mood every day. With non-fiction that you don't necessarily get like lost in and can't put down, you kind of, well for me anyway, I have to kind of like set myself targets with non-fiction to make sure I'm kind of like getting through it and not just abandoning it. So I usually try and, you know, do 10 pages in the morning, 10 pages at night or something like that, because it's not really like a novel where you can just sit down and read 50 pages in a go. I find I like to kind of digest the information a bit more slower, you know? With Conversations on Love, I was getting up and reading my 10 pages every day, and it was putting me in the best mood ever. And honestly, it taught me so much about myself, which was so unexpected. I don't think I really knew what to expect from the book. I was just going off of Paul Mescal's recommendation. There was times, no joke, where I was bawling my eyes out reading this book, and why am I literally tearing up thinking about it? It's a book I will recommend to absolutely everyone, no matter what stage in your life you're at. It talks about all different types of love, you know, love you receive from your friends, from your family, from romantic relationships, and like about the importance of it all, yet how we place so much importance on like the love from romantic relationships. It also did go a good bit into grief, and I honestly just think this is one of those books that I will go back to time and time again, like that I will pick up when I'm feeling in need of that boost or that reminder of that lesson I learned, and there were so many bits I highlighted in this, and I'm looking forward to going back and reading all those. And I think as well, like, we'll all experience grief, and I know that'll just be stored away for me there as a source of comfort to read. It was honestly such a beautiful book. I'm gonna say this was my non-fiction book of the year. Okay, Happy Place by Emily Henry was amazing, and was the first time this year that I got fully like lost and engrossed in a novel. I read that in June while I was on holiday, and it was one of those ones I could not put it down. I could not get myself off of my beach towel and put it down. Like, I was literally like this to it, and when I would go for lunch I was sat there at lunch like that. It was incredible. I feel like I haven't read something like that where I've just got fully lost and engrossed in it since the previous year, when I got so invested in like Daisy Jones and the Six, and what was another really good one I read that year? Like Verity. Do you know what I mean? Like those kind of vibes where you just are like, this was just like the book of the summer for me, like the novel of the summer. Such a nice holiday read. It's a romance story, but it's kind of like, it's not your traditional romance story. It's kind of like the highs and the lows, and the like miscommunications, and the frustrations, and how two people can be so bad at communicating, and then how that affects. I don't want to give too much away, but this book was such a good read, and I gave it 5 stars. So we've got Happy Place was the book of the summer, In Order to Live was the book of the year, and Conversations on Love was the non-fiction book of the year. Oh, then we moved on to a Taylor Jenkins Reid book. I've loved everything that I've read of Taylor Jenkins Reid so far. What have I read of hers? I've read Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, I've read Malibu Rising, and I think there's another one I've read but I'm forgetting. Anyway, I read Carrie Soto Is Back. I like that in Taylor Jenkins Reid's books there's like mention of characters that there's been in other books, and you're like, I know them, but you don't have to have read other books for it. Like, they're literally just, you know, a mention of a name, but it's just kind of, I don't know, it's just nice. To be honest, when I read the blurb for this, I was like, am I gonna enjoy this? But I'm gonna give it a shot because I've enjoyed everything else I've read of hers. It was incredible. Again, one of those ones like really struggled to put down. I think I read the majority of this on a plane journey, and like I would be a sleeper on plane journeys. Like I would, you know, put my headphones in for half an hour or read for half an hour and then be out cold for the rest of the plane journey. I didn't sleep a wink this whole plane journey because I was stuck into this book. Like, I was really hooked on it. And you would think, judging by the description of the book, it's about a tennis player like working her way up to become like a professional tennis player or the best tennis player in the world type of thing, and like competing in Wimbledon and all those tournaments. I don't know the name, I can't even remember the names of them. You kind of think, how interesting of a story can that be? Like, how much can I read about someone playing tennis and about a ball going back and forth? But I don't know how Taylor Jenkins Reid does it, but she just does. It just is amazing. I give it 4 stars. It was a really good novel. I would highly recommend it. It's so crazy because when the matches are happening in the book, you literally feel like you're sat at the stadium watching it happen. You feel like you're there, like at Wimbledon, watching the ball go back and forth, like feeling the tension of the crowd, watching the two players. The imagery I was getting from that book was crazy. And I don't know if it was because I'd been to Wimbledon that summer, so I could really clearly imagine it. I don't know if maybe that had an effect on it, but I just thought it was such a good book. The next book I read was a little short fiction book called Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan, an Irish author. This was a story about the Magdalene laundry scandal in the Catholic Church, which I'd heard of it, but I wasn't really aware of it. This told it in a really, I don't want to say beautiful way, because it's very much not a beautiful story. And it's not a beautiful scandal whatsoever. It told it in a way that wasn't so overt. Is that the right word? I really enjoyed this book, and if you're interested in learning more about the Magdalene laundry scandal, I'm sure there's lots more on it. I got a few messages from people to say that there is it a movie or a series? I think it's a movie on iPlayer called The Magdalene Sisters, which is apparently very good. But I really enjoyed this book. It was only 120 pages or something like that. It really pulled me out of a reading slump because I literally was able to sit down and read it in like 2 sittings. And I think Claire Keegan is a very good author. I gave this 4 stars. I went on to read another one of Claire Keegan's books after that, called Foster. This again is a shorter novel. I think it was, I want to say, in around the 100-page mark as well. I was just like, at this point, I think I'd been in such a reading slump. I was just trying to get recommendations for shorter books to like really pull me out of it, and to be fair, it actually worked with these 2. Foster is the story of a little girl from Ireland who comes from like a very big Catholic family where they're not so well off. She's kind of just like one of, I can't remember, let's say one of 8, and just wouldn't get that much attention at home. They don't have that much money to buy her like new clothes or anything like that. Anyway, the mum's pregnant and she's gonna give birth, and there's just too much going on in the house, so this girl goes to stay with another family for the summer. And it's kind of all about the differences in the 2 homes and like the summer that she experiences with this other family, and the difference in love that she receives from them, and the kind of stories she finds out as well. I don't know, I don't want to go into this too much. Like, obviously it's only 100 pages, so it's not the same with the last one. Like, there's only so much of a story there can be when a story is only 100 pages, so it doesn't like deep dive really far into this like complex story, but there's something quite nice about the simplicity of them and how it is kind of cut short. Like, you don't know what happens in the end, but that's just, there's no finality to them, but that's what makes them kind of good in a way. I don't know, I did enjoy this. I give it 4 stars. Next up was a book that I had actually intended on reading a lot earlier in the year than I ended up reading, and that was Notes on Heartbreak by Annie Lord. I think this came up as a recommendation again when I was going through a breakup. I bought it at the same time as Conversations on Love, and I probably would have benefited more from reading this book then, like around about that kind of time, than when I did, but just the way things worked and, you know, the books that I ended up picking up, I didn't end up getting around to reading this until November. Notes on Heartbreak is an incredible book. It is a memoir, but it's kind of jumping back and forth in timeline between the start of her relationship and then the end of it, and like the breakup. So she's kind of like jumping back and forth in timeline, and you're getting all sides of it. It is so raw. You go through all the emotions with the author. I was in tears at some point. It brings back a lot, I will say that. I also think if you're not ready to read, like, there's a sweet spot for when it's a good time to read this. Is not that, okay, not that you can't read this at any stage in your life. I honestly think you can. I think it's an amazing book, and I think literally everyone would enjoy it. However, to get the most out of this book, I think there's like a sweet spot, and I think it needs to be not right after your breakup when you're in the pits, but when you're like coming out of that and need a little bit of help and reassurance along that. And I think that would be the perfect time to read Notes on Heartbreak. It's such an amazing read. You learn so many lessons along the way, and like lessons that you've already learned, but it kind of like reestablishes them in your head, and you like relearn them with the author and like as she's going through it. I gave this 4 stars. To be honest, if I read it at like the time I think I probably should have read it, I probably would have given this 5 stars. Yeah, I thought this was an amazing read, but just like warning that it does bring back a lot. But that was okay for me because I was like well past it, you know. And then the 20th and therefore final book I read of 2023 was Convenience Store Woman, and I did give this a 5 stars. Unexpectedly, this one really pleasantly surprised me. It had been on my to read list for a long time. I'd seen it recommended by quite a few people on Instagram. I think Jack Edwards had recommended this one as well. So I basically wanted to make up my 20 books because that was my goal for 2023. I have a really bad habit of reading like too many books at once, so I think I was in the middle of about 5 books, but I just hadn't even hit the kind of like 20 or 30% mark of any of them. And I just thought, you know what, if I haven't had the motivation within the last like 3 months to get these 5 books or however many it was finished, I'm not gonna suddenly in the last like 5 days of the year be able to finish them. Let's like, you know, take, I know it sounds so stupid, let's get a new one, let's add another to the mix. That's what I decided to do. I decided I need like a bit of a spur of motivation here, so let's download something I've wanted to read for a while and hopefully just be able to sit down and get it read in like 3 sittings. So that's what I did with Convenience Store Woman. Now, to be honest, I don't know why I don't know why that was my book of choice, because if you were to read the blurb, you would think it would be quite a, not boring, but like in the same realm as Before the Coffee Gets Cold, like a little bit monotonous, not much going on with the storyline, like that type of thing. Judging by the blurb of this book, you would think that would be the case. So I don't really know why I would pick that to try and like get read and to motivate me to read for the last 4 days of the year. Actually, I do know why. It was because it was like just under 200 pages and I thought I can have a good crack at that in the next few days. But anyway, I was so glad that I picked this book. As I said, just really pleasantly surprised me. So basically the premise of the story is about a girl who works in just like a convenience store, like a Kmart type of thing. She doesn't have a partner. She's no aspirations to like, you know, get a new job or progress in her career or anything. She is very much content and happy. She loves her routine of like working in the convenience store. She's mastered it like down to a T. She feels like she is part of that convenience store, you know. She's worked there since the day it's opened and she just can't imagine her life like any other way, and she's no desire to imagine her life any other way because she's very happy and content in that. But basically everyone around her cannot wrap their heads around that. Like her colleagues, her friends, her family, no one can fathom the fact that she could be happy and content doing that, because they are maybe picturing themselves in that position and can't see them being happy in it. And as a result, they're like constantly trying to ask her like, do you not want more for yourself? Do you not want this? Do you not want that? Like, what about doing this? Or what about applying for this job? Or have you tried these dating apps? And like all these things, and people are constantly trying to like push society's norms onto her. It's obviously told from her perspective, so you're seeing how she's reacting to that and how she's taking these things, and there ends up being like a lot of lessons that you learn about societal norms and about what we value in people, weirdly. I don't want to give too much away, but I thought it was like such a beautiful book that had like so many little kind of underlying meanings and really makes you question. Like, for example, one of the big takeaways for me was that often we can be so blindsided by societal norms to the point that we would rather be unhappy in a norm than be happy not following the norm. But we're so blindsided by the norm that we can't see that you could be happy outside of that, and like that's a massive takeaway from the book, as well as loads of other things. But yeah, I thought it was a really good book and it really just took me by surprise. I wasn't really expecting that from it at all. So that was a lovely way to round off my 20 books of 2023. My goal for this year is to read 24 books. I'm upping it. That's a book every other week, 2 books a month. I feel like that's more than achievable. I would love to get to a point where I could read a book a week, because imagine you could get through 52 books in a year and actually make like a proper dent in your to read list. That is my dream. I've also started a book club for this year. If you go onto my Instagram, I've got a little broadcast channel for it. It's called Emma's Book Club. I'll be doing lots of updates on there, lots of little things to keep you motivated to read. We're gonna aim for a book a month on that, and it will be mostly virtual, but I'm hoping to maybe get some in-person meetups organized as well. And yeah, I'm really excited to read with you all. Let me know if you enjoyed this video and if you want to see some more book content from me. But as always, I'll keep you updated with what I'm reading on my Instagram stories. I've also got a Goodreads. But yeah, join the book club. I feel like everyone's New Year's resolution should be to read more for 2024. And if that's the case, you should join my book club. Okay, love you. Bye.